Welcome to Discordant Harmony, the podcast where Jason and I dive into the issues that stir discord both in our communities and churches. Our hope is to offer Christian men and women a voice of reason and faith as we are all challenged to think critically and discover how we should respond in ways that honor God in our words and actions. This week, Jason joins us from Peru as we tackle a number of topics, including Christians finding how to speak the truth in loving, authentic ways, and what keeps us from doing that. Here it is, episode number 10. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. We got Jason coming from us from Iquitos, Peru. How's it going down there, buddy?
Oh, it's fantastic. Just shipped out a 21-person team from Denver. It was a blast. This was a experiment for us to see if we wanted to venture into this big mission trip world again. But it refortified my hope and belief in getting young adults down here to have a transformative experience, and had so much fun with all of them. Each one had their own unique story, and there's actually one that is now going to stay for the next 6 months at least.
Oh, that's cool. So Denver, so you really indoctrinated them into the world of humidity.
Totally. Yep. Went from dry and high to low and wet.
Low and wet.
But you know what was really nice is that since they are Coloradoans, they all had the full out tent gear, and they all showed up with one bag, and it was so awesome. They all had their big old camping bags, and easy to bring that group around the jungle.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, I'm sitting outside the porch today just in solidarity of you of being outside, although it's 74 degrees here today and the humidity's pretty relatively low, so I'm enjoying it. But we had some
you look like you're more in the jungle than I am.
Yeah, so see how that works. But no. My backyard is a bit of a jungle, probably needs a little work done on it, so anyway, well, good. Well, I think today what we talked about, I've got some, because you've been, in the jungle, so you've been away from the news, so you don't really know what's been going on, right, in the world.
I don't. Yeah, I was planning on it, but Starlink did not work. For those of you that are staying in touch with all of every single episode, did not work at all.
All of our plans. So I'll make sure I call Elon later on and tell them the issue.
Well, yeah, we want to show the audience. See, Starlink's over there trying to work. We're going to install it on the roof later this afternoon. But I got animal fact of the day before we kick off.
Oh, yeah. I would hear that.
Did you know hippos sweat pink?
They sweat pink. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yep. Don't ask me why. That's all I know.
You don't know why. That's all you know?
I didn't have time for this, man. I just looked up one quick animal fact, and that's what I got.
all hippos or just girl hippos?
Yeah. Oh, it's got to be both. It's got to be both.
You're showing everybody Jorge's house. One of the things I love about Jorge's house is, unlike most places, the barrier between inside and outside at Jorge's house is very relative.
That is totally true. It's all just an open air complex.
Yeah,
but it's awesome. We got little turtles over there. It's a blast.
Yeah, I love his place. That's a pretty cool place. So, well, good. Well, and when do you head back home to the States for a little bit of a break?
Yeah, I got a few days, and then we're off on family vacation. So
yeah,
we'll have to figure out how to do this again from Colorado. But I thought about the idea of without having any kind of technology. We got back in yesterday afternoon, and we just relaxed, and so I haven't looked at a single thing.
Okay,
and I know the presidential debates were last night, right?
Yes. So I have some headlines, and I'm going to read the headline, and you have to decide if it's real or not. Is this a real headline that's taken place in the last couple of days or not?
Okay.
Right? Okay. So, all right, here's the first
good.
one. Since you mentioned debate, I'll start with this one. President Biden appears to fall asleep during debate.
Come on, man. I would say that's probably true.
It is actually false. But
Oh no, Sleepy
yeah,
Joe didn't
but
fall asleep.
but I think he appeared to die during the debate. So the I'll tell you the quick
Die?
no, or he was dead coming in. Really, the
What?
quick the quick summary is everybody, all the Democrats and Biden's team are in a panic today because he did so lousy last night. Trump
Oh no.
Trump stayed in his lane, like to his benefit. I mean, he was still Trump with his, it was what was funny about it is there were two guys constantly like, my presidency's the best ever and yours is the worst ever, kind of thing.
Oh, oh,
But
oh my gosh.
but
That's helpful.
right. But Trump followed the rules and he didn't make a spectacle of himself. Like he was Trump. And there was nothing newsworthy about Trump.
Hmm.
But Biden from the very moment just seemed like he was just like gone. Like just
So he
he made a lot of
so he
mistakes.
just so he just buried himself,
He
more or
kind of he
less.
kind of
He
buried
didn't have to do
himself.
anything.
Right. So
Oh
now
boy.
so now the question is the Democrats are going to start scrambling to see if they can convince him to quit because anyway, we'll see. All right, so that was the first headline. All right, here's the second one. Mother with young child ejected from plane after accidentally misgendering a trans airline employee.
Okay, can you clarify eject?
Forced to leave the plane. Like not
Oh,
like
because my
not
mind instantly
ejections.
went like, "Phew."
Yeah,
Right. That's probably true.
it is true. Yes. A a lady with her young child, 16-month baby, were trying to get on a United Airlines flight in San Francisco, and she called the gate agent a sir. She said something about sir to the gate agent, and the gate agent um, identifies as a woman, and the gate agent was upset by that. And apparently, some conversation continued, and finally, the airline said, "Because of your bigotry, we're gonna." They kicked her off the plane because
Oh
of her
boy.
her bigotry.
So was there a kerfuffle or was it just a misunderstanding?
It was a
And
misunderstanding. I mean, like the lady said that she's like, she goes, I'm not trying to cause an issue here. I just thought it was a man. I didn't have any idea how could I tell? And so she was just trying to get her baby on the
oh
plane. And
my,
so, yeah, that'll be interesting what happens.
yikes!
Cause then she had to pay $1,000 to buy plane tickets for her and her baby and her elderly mother to take another flight on American Airlines home. So anyway, there you go. All right. Here's another headline for you. Uber and Lyft drivers secure $32 an hour minimum wage in Massachusetts.
Holy cow! Gosh, that seems high. I'm gonna, gosh, I guess if I disagree, it's just that I don't think it's that high. But I guess I'm gonna say yes.
That's true.
We're talking Boston. Is Boston
Yeah,
probably?
yeah, I guess, but it's the whole state. I didn't really
Holy
read. I
cow!
didn't really read this whole story, but yes. So apparently they were managed, which makes me think: how is anybody gonna take Uber and Lyft in? That's gonna be expensive.
No doubt. That is ridiculous.
$32 an hour. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. All right. I got a couple more for you here.
Okay.
Groceries. Local grocery chain implements robot assistants to help customer experience.
Oh, I hope that's true. I want those.
Wouldn't that be cool? But it's not. It's not true. That's just completely made up.
Darn it.
Yeah. Okay, you're gonna like this one.
Hey, dude, I saw one of those. I saw one of those traveling robots going up the street in Iquitos. One of those like traveling shipping things.
Oh yeah,
I couldn't believe they were down
in
here.
Iquitos
Anyways, go on. That, yeah, it was crazy.
of all places. All right, here's one you're gonna like. The Royals all in with trade for Max Scherzer.
Oh, wow. There's no way. There's too cheap. They're not going to do it. No.
That's true. They have not done that. But it's it's plausible because Max came back and he pitched his first game last week of the
Hmm.
season with the Rangers and he did well, but the Rangers they're falling back. Like they're in a pretty
Yep.
solid third place in the AL West. Whereas the Astros, have managed to get back up to 500, and they're in
Oh,
contention
have
now.
they?
So yeah, they're
Okay.
back in
No,
contention.
yeah. We How
But
have we been doing? How have the Royals been doing?
they've been about 500 over the last. So I think they're a pretty good distance back of the Guardians now, like 8 games back. But for the wild card, they're right on the edge of the wild card spot. So it
Okay.
kind of depends on the day. I think they're technically in the wild card right now. It depends on them, and Boston are kind of like a half game from each other, percentage points. So they're in. I mean, I think the Royals are in. And then I have one more for you. Six Flags Roaring Rapids ride malfunction leads guests to leap into the water.
Oh my. That has to be true.
It is true. It's one of
Amusement parks don't make headlines anymore unless
yeah,
something bad happens.
yeah, but that's one of those. This in Six Flags over Texas, the Roaring Rapids ride, which is it's one of those big
Yeah, it's
circle.
like yeah,
What is it at Worlds of Fun? The
it's the Fury of the Nile.
Fury of the Nile. It's that same idea. Yeah, but apparently something happened there where a boat got stuck or something, and the people had to jump out of the boat into the water. There's a video
That
of
is
it.
gnarly.
There's a video of it I was watching earlier. It's pretty interesting, and people are like, get those
Wow.
kids, whatever. So, you did pretty good, I guess.
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad for being out of.
Is there anything else? So did you watch the whole debate? Is there anything else that stood out
I
besides
I did watch the whole debate. I was again, I was surprised at the moderators did a really good job. The format was a really good format as it turned out. It probably was. They changed the format to try to control Trump from, like 4 years ago when he kept talking over
yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
I think it actually helped him because it kept him contained. And he must have listened to his advisors, or he's learned, because he managed it pretty well. There was moments where he was kind of being, kind of pushing things, but one of the funny things that happened is they got into an argument about their golf games, about who was the better golfer. Like
No way.
spontaneously, because they asked the question.
What?
Well, the moderators asked the question to Biden about voters' concerns about him being too old, and
Okay.
he sort of deflected that. And then they asked the question to Trump, and Trump said, I've taken cognitive tests and I've had physicals, and I'm in great shape. I still play golf all the time. And Biden made some comment about he plays golf and he's a 6 handicap. And Trump laughed, and
What?
yeah.
No way in the world.
Right. He says he's a 6 handicap. And so Trump laughed, and he says, I've seen your swing. You can't hit the ball 50 feet. There's no way you're so then Biden says, I'll do a drive contest with you anytime. And then they literally were having an argument about their golf game. It was
Oh
awesome.
my gosh. Let's let that be the presidential election. Let's just watch. We'll have the most televised event ever.
Yeah. Whoever wins
And
the
whatever
golf,
one makes it through 18,
whoever
you get to
wins,
be president. The other
whoever
one
wins
might
the
die.
golf. Yes. I love that.
That would that would be Charles Barkley on the call.
Yeah.
What an event. That would be so awesome.
Charles Barkley. That, that shot by Biden, that was terrible. That was
That
terrible.
was terrible. Man, that man can't hit ball 50 yards.
Well,
Okay,
he
anyways.
can't
So
he can't
was
hit
it
a
the
ball.
was it the I'm trying to think of what all I thought I was gonna miss. Was the NBA draft this week? Was that this week?
Yeah. NBA draft happened Thursday, Friday
Did
night.
Bronny go to LA?
No, he did not. He went to
He didn't?
I can't remember now where he went, but he went second round. Your
What?
yeah, it was a while before he went. Your buddy Johnny Furphy didn't go until the second round. The
Oh,
he
he wasn't. He's not ready. You gotta look
Yeah.
this up. I need to see this real quick. Can you look it up? See where
Yeah.
Bronny went?
Yeah, I will. I'll look it up. The Baylor had 2 guys go in the first round. Let's see, draft tracker. Let me see what's going on here. So, first overall was Zachary Rechiar,
Yeah, the foreign guy.
the
Yeah, the foreign
French
guy.
guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see. I'll find it. Bronny. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, he went 55th overall to the. Oh, he did. Oh, he
He
did go to the
did.
Lakers. He did go
Did
to the
he?
Lakers. Yeah, he went to the Lakers. Yeah, okay.
Whoa. Whoa. What? Wow.
At first, I was thinking it was the
The
Clippers, but it was a trade from. It was a.
King James. King
Yeah,
got his son
the
to
Lakers.
LA.
Yeah, the Lakers unite LeBron James with his oldest son Bronny, pairing the two in purple and gold. Bronny struggled
Wow.
last season with USC
Wow.
after suffering sudden cardiac arrest last summer. Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
That's why he failed. And then he didn't play a lot in the season because of it.
But yeah, there you go. So
That's
that's
good for him.
Johnny Furphy went to San Antonio. He was 35th.
Oh, that's good for him. That's cool. Get to
Yep.
go play with the Giant.
Yeah. So anyway,
All right.
that's the NBA. Anything else you need to know about? I need to catch you up on?
Not for now.
Not
We
for
can
now.
talk next week.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But
Unless you think of something.
nothing I can think
Oh,
of.
who won the NHL playoffs?
Oh, Florida.
Yes.
Yeah. It went.
Wow,
I,
this is awesome way to
yeah.
find out.
I mean, I watched it. It was a great game. They won 2-1. They,
Cool.
I mean,
That's great.
the third period, they basically just it was like a prevent defense. They hardly shot the puck. They just laid back and they said, if someone's going to beat us, it's going to be someone other than Connor McDavid. And Edmonton just they could not get a shot.
Well, that was their whole philosophy is that in the playoffs, that defense, that they built that team for that. And
Yeah,
I guess they held out.
it was pretty darn good. They nearly got an empty netter at the end, but just missed it. But yeah, so that was fun. But why am I getting a call from West Branch, Michigan? I'm not going to take that call.
That is a pollster.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go. Oh my word. Stop.
So what do we want to make our main topic?
Well, you were talking about a conversation that you had with the folks down there in your team about cancel culture.
Yes.
And I found that interesting because you're talking about getting their perspective because these were mainly Gen Zers on your
Or beyond. What is it then? What is it after Z?
gosh, is there anything after Z? Double A?
Maybe. Does time exist after that? Well, so they were all 18. So the team was 18 to 25, and then the
Okay.
leaders were both 20, 29.
Okay. Then that's probably all Gen Z. Because my kids are Gen
Yeah.
Z and they're in that.
All right. So yeah, so it was an opportunity for me just to kind of, I guess, get a candid conversation for a week around, what they are thinking. They are part of a vibrant young adult ministry where the church that they're a part of is pretty systematic in the way in which it's structured, where they have it all broken down: elementary school, middle school, high school, then young adults, then young marrieds, then single professionals, and then kind of a general community groups kind of atmosphere. But each one is very segmented in a way where you move yourself along. And so with the young adults, they have each of these things have their own service throughout the week, and then like the young adults then serve and help lead on Sunday mornings. And so the folks that are leading it, Jeff and Anastasia are their names. They were new young adult leaders coming in 2 years ago, and they had about 6 folks, and now they're over 130 or so.
Wow.
And so really have a beat on what the young adults of Littleton / Denver area are kind of looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really an opportunity for me just to throw a bunch of questions, and they threw a bunch of questions at me, being in the midst of a foreign environment where we're forced to depend upon ourselves and one another. And so one of those questions was, what is relevant to you today, in terms of what the church looks like, in terms of society and culture, and what keeps your attention, and then what do you just dismiss? Because that's one of the things that I saw in asking some of the questions is the first thing they just kind of first thing that, they aren't interested in, they just kind of roll their eyes and move on. That it's just this thing where at the end of the day, for most of that conversation, maybe we can get into it here in a bit. It really is anchored and founded upon authenticity for the most
Mhm.
part. And the minute somebody is found to be inauthentic or dishonest in some sort, or maybe stands to gain something, that's a big turnoff for that generation.
Okay.
But the interesting thing to me is, in contrast to the rest of society currently, with politicians and mega churches, mega church leaders falling all over the place. It seems to be much more of a hush hush. Let's move things along and let's try our best not to get canceled. But the very activity that you are doing gets you canceled by a certain segment of our of our audience, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
Okay.
Does that make sense what I'm saying at all?
I think so.
All right. So I guess a question out of it is like, I guess specifically, maybe it's easier to start with church in and of itself. Like,
Yeah.
do you see cancel culture like at your church? I know you're more heavily involved at the moment, but is that an ongoing conversation? Do you feel like there's a trepidation around maybe getting canceled for posting something on Facebook or saying something? Is that part of the narrative with
I,
your church and your friend circle?
I guess I hear people talk about it, but it's not something that is highly prevalent in my mind. I don't see Certainly it's not something that from the stage is ever talked about, but that's because our pastor tends to stay out of that sort of he's pretty good at just I'm sticking with the Bible and teaching what's going on here in this particular passage and not wading into a lot of current event sort of things. Um,
Okay.
but but I suppose that I hear some people make some jokes or comments about it. I don't know if it's a huge trepidation or if it's just sometimes it's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? An anecdotal funny thing. Like, oh, someone's gonna get canceled, because they said that or whatever, kind of
Okay.
making jokes.
Sure.
So I don't know if it's a but I'm not deeply embedded in it's weird because I'm on staff now, but I'm not really deeply embedded with like a ton of people there at this point. So it'll be interesting
Sure.
as I get to know more people at the campus that I'll be leading worship at, which I guess is something that's I can officially announce that I'm going to be leading worship now at one of the campuses of our church is the official guy. So, which is kind of cool. Haven't done that. Haven't done that in a while.
Congratulations, sir.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a while.
And so
So
when's that start? Is that next week?
I'm playing in the band for the next 3 weeks. To overlap the guy who's leaving. He's leaving for a good reason. And then the 21st of July is my first real Sunday where I'm leading, and he'll be gone.
All right.
So that's cool. Anyway, I don't know.
All right.
I'm not answering your question very well, but I guess my response is I don't see it as a huge thing.
Okay. Well, maybe that's why I think I'm on the other spectrum, is that I feel it a lot. Maybe it's because I let my mouth run a little bit more than you. And, especially within my other podcast, but then even some of the things that you and I have talked about, I've got a lot of pushback from people
Mm-hmm.
on the overall conversation, to the degree where it's, a very small version of a cancel, but they're like heard our conversation around immigrants and guns and, whether or not, and they were just like, yep, I'm turning you off. I'm never listening to you again, is some of the feedback that I got from some folks.
Okay.
And so there's this question in my mind of, okay, when I consider, okay, what is interesting to me, what do I want to have a overall discussion about, how much do I put my weight and conviction behind it, or do I hold on to those things and I just have it in private conversation so that I will continue to have this platform to reach as many people as possible.
I see.
And I see that a lot when it comes to a lot of these fallen pastors, this situation where there's a lot of NDAs, being handed out in the idea that, okay, we're going to settle this, but you can't go talk about this to the rest of the congregation.
Mm-hmm.
And, Kanaka camps had a big old one. I could go on, and it's all this balance of, well, do you want salvations to continue at this church? Or, if you let this get out and you spread it, it's going to be detrimental to, the overall salvations and the cause of this mission of this church or the vision of this church. And where I land on that is it's a bunch of baloney. Like I can't handle it. Like it really bothers me. And that's part of, even the testimony as to part of the reason why Chelsea goes to the church and I don't go to the church at the moment, where I think there's not a can't.
Is there a difference between, I guess maybe it's a definition thing, when we talk about cancel culture? Like, I think of that as, well, people who have a certain view of certain things, there's cultural wide people say, oh, those people, they don't get to have a voice. They don't get to speak, and they basically are sidelines, and we should ostracize those people. That feels like that's something different than maybe a church or organization say, well, we're unwilling to right, wrong, or indifferent. We're unwilling to talk about the details of a situation because we don't want that to hurt us. So I guess
okay. I hear what you're saying, but within that phrase, we don't want that to hurt us. Implicitly ingrained within that, we don't want to get canceled by donors, by people that are tithing. That's the way I interpret that.
Okay, that's fair enough.
So maybe that's why we're maybe not on the same page right now.
No, just trying to. I just want to know how you were defining it. So you're defining it. Any times that people say, "Hey, no, they're not gonna support us if they know something, or if we express some sort of view or whatever, that we're gonna lose support. We're gonna lose."
Well, it can be that, and you go do something stupid, and society cancels you. For me, I put those in the same bucket.
Okay, that's fine. Just for the sake of the conversation, we can put them in the same bucket. That's what I wanted to be clear on. And I did want to also let you know, and when you get home, we can talk more about this. But I had coffee with a really good buddy of mine that I've known for many years last week, and he thinks a lot like you and I do on a lot of political things and theological things. He was actually at the the Southern Baptist convention, because he works at a Baptist church, and his pastor invited him to go with him. So I asked him about some of the things we talked about, and he gave some interesting thoughts on that, where maybe some of the stuff we were hearing and reading is not quite accurate. It wasn't portrayed. It was portrayed maybe in some of the news stories as being bigger deals than they really were in person. So it'll be interesting I'll tell you about it when you get back. But there are some things about that where, like with those NDAs and with the vote on the women, and like they were less controversial from his point of view being there than it made it sound in some news outlets. So there you go.
Sure. Well, and that's, I think, often can be the case, is how somebody's digesting something, or the lens by which somebody's seeing an issue through. Maybe it is softer, and I'm not going to disagree. I'm looking forward to the conversation. But for me, I guess moving forward, like for today, I find it interesting, for us, and maybe that's where this just needs to land as far as an overall topic for today is, to what degree do we, really push into issues that and give our beliefs, in fear that maybe somebody hears this and says, yeah, I don't really like that guy, Jason. And since it's going out to the world for all to see, how conscious of that should I be when I'm conveying my point, conveying a belief.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I have in the back of my mind, I think, okay, now I'm a staff pastor for my church. And so I want to be careful not to say anything, one, so stupid that my church would say, "Oh, we don't think we want you to work with us." I don't think that would happen. Hopefully, but also something that would misrepresent or make something like that's. I have to admit that somewhere back in here where there's a filter, and to some degree, that's probably healthy to have a filter, but how much of a filter is probably the question I know that you and I probably struggle with. And I've struggled with that for
Yep.
years. How, where should my filter be? Do I just blast my mouth, but then I run the risk of maybe I'm telling the truth, but I'm running the risk of ostracizing somebody or getting myself, I don't know. But where do you land on that?
Well, I'm probably on the other side. That's probably what makes us discordant. In theory,
Yeah.
that I found myself where I am for a reason, probably that the like I now don't get me wrong, I really am doing my best to grow and stay humble in the midst of my perspective. And in talking with the group that we just had, having 8 intentional days of almost 12 to 14 hours worth of conversation with these guys, that it was so refreshing to me where they responded to my authenticity and my beliefs, and many things that we talked about we disagreed with, and they had one view and I had a different view, and I treasured the time that we could actually have these long form conversations. That some of them were regarding faith in and of itself, that with a lot of them being newly Christian or young in their faith, that they had questions around what kind of things do you experience in the jungle, and what does miracles look like, what does you know to what degree do you see spiritual warfare, to what degree do you see, and so I'm giving my truth, what I've experienced, and that's something different than they've ever experienced before.
Yeah.
And so then that leads to more questions around, okay, what does scripture say? How does scripture identify what was happening in the Bible towards what happens now, and what is fair ground to even expect to pray for? Should we be praying for miracles to happen? Should we be expecting miracles? And is a lack of miracles a sign of our lack of faith or God's divine timing? There was a lot of those kind of conversations on the one side. On the other side, like the leader Jeff and I, we had an initial kind of just healthy conversation around the Ephesians 4 APES conversation, where he's pretty solidified in the view that there stopped being apostles after the New Testament. And so when there was the chief apostles that were there following Jesus, and then from there we were released with the Holy Spirit, and that's what was there. Now, the way he initially heard me explaining, because to a degree I agree with him, the way that I had explained to the group as we were talking and trying to get them in the right places, talking about spiritual gifts, all these different things, that the APES in and of itself is similar to like an Enneagram or any of these things, where it helps us to identify our personalities and to figure out what kind of bents and strengths we may have, that we may be better served in these type of activities. Not specifically that you are a divine prophet over here, that whatever you hear God tell you in your dream, that's what's going to happen.
Exactly.
But no. That's why we need the whole fivefold representation, that you bring it into the group. We pray about it together. We all have the Holy Spirit, and we can all discern together what it is that God may be leading us to do.
Yeah.
And so what was so refreshing to me is that there was just curiosity and general interest in all of these conversations. And I contrast that with what I see in our society today, with news headlines, with what is getting broadcast, and there's just not a lot of curiosity. It's all being broken down to these fundamentalist views
Hmm.
that, okay, and doesn't allow for any kind of wiggle room. And if you step outside of those fundamentalist views, then one group or another can just dismiss you.
Right.
And that to me is just so anti Jesus, anti community and love in the way that he's called us to then engage people.
Right.
And that's what's so confusing to me around this whole cancel culture conversation.
No, it's so that I completely agree with you because I absolutely love those kinds of conversations too. Been doing it for many years. And I know the people in my life, you're one of them where I know I can get into the meat of those things and have disagreements. There's a couple of other buddies of mine that will go to breakfast on occasion and we'll talk about, current events and we can have disagreements on all kinds of theological things, whatever. And I enjoy it. I love that. And I hate the fact that we live in a culture right now where everyone has to tiptoe around everything on eggshells because, oh, if I talk about transgender things or even the economy or whatever, it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
the old joke about at Thanksgiving dinner you don't talk about politics and religion, but it feels like at Thanksgiving dinner now you can't talk about anything, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to offend somebody. So what I said earlier about I want to have a filter to make sure I don't say anything that would misalign or get me out of whack with my church. While that's true, I'm not really concerned about that in a deep way. That's why I'm doing this podcast is because I want to have these open conversations and I don't like, but you were asking me about if I experienced that at church. Real honestly, where I felt that the most was at the most recent job I had it's in a secular marketing agency. There was a very strong sense of around people of, oh, let's make sure we don't say the wrong thing that
Mm-hmm.
is gonna be off putting to somebody on the team, and before you know it, they're going to HR, and because that happened to a guy on my team, I felt bad for him. He said a word kind of in a jokingly way, and it really wasn't a big deal. But then someone didn't like it, and they told HR, and before I know it, HR's telling me, "Oh, we have to have an official conversation with this guy." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So I'm 100% with you. I hate the fact that we have to tiptoe around these issues and hide behind memes and whatever instead of just being honest about them and let's have real conversations about these things. But they're afraid to do that. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and so with that, that's, to try to land the plane, like I look at experience, you look at scripture and you see the way Paul and Peter, go and engage, large crowds of people and
Right.
ultimately kind of pick fights, to the idea that, hey, bring my God against your gods. Let's go. Let's talk.
And that is the example
And
we see. Jesus and Paul, Peter, and others. Right. You're right. That's the example we see. They don't mind to instigate a little bit, take a little bit.
and so then I'm confused as to why it seems like just the running understanding for the most part that we're just going to stay in our lane. Church isn't going to talk about these controversial issues for the most part. We don't want to offend either side.
Hmm.
And to me, I don't like it. And I to the degree that I can just implore who's ever listening, if you want some encouragement, hey, come join me in a conversation. And because I just, in the midst of the conversation not happening, I just see it going farther and farther and farther into these isolated circles and echo chambers where
Yeah.
then, how do we even break these things down? And it just feels like we're going in the wrong direction when it comes to unity, when it comes to being able to understand one another.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe for you have some, like, I've got a few ideas, but I can kick it to you as far as, what we as Christians could do to, kind of break that mold or, push into, um,
Yeah.
the debate or the conversation.
No, I agree with you. I think that that's true. The whole people that are just trying to straddle the fence and stay ultra neutral. I almost have, this might sound strange because I don't really like these people at all, but I almost have a little bit more respect for like Westboro Baptist than I do for some Methodist church that tries to keep things so neutral where they don't take a stand on anything. You get what I'm saying there? It's like, oh, everything's
Yeah. So
okay,
at
and
least you know where Westboro
at
stands.
least you know where they
At least you know where
stand.
they're at.
Right, you know where they're at.
Sure.
I don't agree with them,
Yeah. Totally.
with their tactics and all that, but at least they're taking a side. And that's partially what Jesus told us about being lukewarm, and we see that example a lot. It's like, just take a side. We talked about the women, the pastors being women, and I said, look, if you're a church who doesn't believe women should be pastors, then stand on that conviction. If you think that it's okay, then stand on that conviction. But again, there's a lot of churches, I think you're right. They kind of want to toe the middle ground so they don't upset anybody, and then that means people are the same way. So to get back to your question where you said, well, what can we do about it? I think it's I think it's more, we have to have more, environments like our podcast or other podcasts like ours. And then I think it's a lot of just little small conversations, little groups of two or three, four, maybe five guys or women together, where people have that they're comfortable enough in the relationships with the people around them that they're okay. They don't feel the threat of being open and having real conversations about things. That's the first thing that comes to mind, is those sort of sit around a coffee shop or breakfast or around the campfire kind of idea, where people can have those conversations, just like you had there in the jungle with people, you know?
Sure. Well, and I think I agree. I want to go back to, I do agree. I do agree.
Okay.
But I want to go back to the Westboro Baptist thing because I think that's a bad example, at least for me. I'm not going to lie. I totally get what you're saying, but the hate that they live with,
No, they're
you know,
the
lead
hate.
with
Yeah, the hate is
is,
terrible. I'm not endorsing them or
but
condone them in
I,
any way. They're
but
terrible.
there's, I know, I just can't respect even though, like I know where you stand, and the fact that that then attaches so much to it and so
Yeah.
much tarnished on the Christian. But yes, just
Maybe that's
putting
some,
that out there
so
for
maybe that's a
anybody that's going to come at us.
right. Maybe that's a bad example. Yeah. Disclaimer there. Nothing. I have no love for for those clowns. They're clowns,
Yes, they are.
to say the least.
But for me, I'll add one thing to yours where I think a lot of the Christians that I know, have, especially the earnest ones that like that idea. I think a lot of times what happens with the structures of our church is then, to the degree that the church can help orchestrate, they will facilitate that and they will enter into that. So maybe a community group environment,
Mhm.
maybe, a a men's gathering or women's gathering where, okay, I'm going to engage harder conversations there, whereas the idea of going and engaging strangers or people on the other side of the aisle or on a different side of an opinion isn't an intimidating thing. And
Right.
so, being able to orchestrate those conversations, if I can just, suggest one thing, is to just lead with love. Like, the idea doesn't have to be, okay, we're going to initially start talking about the thing we disagree with. Like,
Mhm.
we need to build some bridges here.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't have to be like, just so you know, I'm against you, transgender person. Like, no, no, no. Hey, tell me your story.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? And once you gain favor, once you gain trust, then being able to talk about the things that you may disagree with in a way that they know your heart, that the love that you have for them as somebody you're called to love, then you can go and have more interesting conversations in a way that won't get you canceled, because you can have a conversation in a way that isn't so, I guess, what's the word? Fiery. I can't think of the word, that just repulsive to somebody, maybe,
Sure.
that
Yeah. It's not
the minute you
off-putting.
get there. And so then, to the degree that, okay, we need to practice, like, I truly believe that's something the church should do better at, is helping congregation members and the church practice having authentic relationships, practice figuring out how to have crucial conversations with people,
Mhm.
because it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. And it's way easier to rest on our laurels than to go out in the world like we're called to go out and figure out how to have some influence and show the love of Christ.
Yeah. So I have a question here for you. Do you think one of the things, I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is going to be on this, but one of the things that hurts that a group of people getting together, getting to know each other, having some real conversation about life and current events, whatever it may be, one of the things that might hurt is a lot of churches, it's fear in the leadership of, well, we need to make sure there's two things. One, they feel like they need to control the conversation or the point of view on such a subject, right? We don't want people talking about X in
Hmm.
this way. We want to make sure that they talk about it in the way that completely agrees with our, 120-page statement of faith, for example, right? So,
Sure.
right. So we don't
Yep.
want people to talk, what if someone gets around a coffee table and they start talking about something theologically that we as the leadership don't agree with, and they start influencing people in a bad way? Oh no. How much of that comes into play? And then also, I think churches also, they believe, oh, if we get 8 people around a table, they're not going to know what to talk about. So we have to give them, some video or some study guide for them to follow. And those guides tend to be, in my mind, they tend to be pretty trite, pretty trivial and superficial in a lot of ways. Because it's hard to write something that really gets into deep, right? So so you have those study guides, you've experienced them, and there's a question and it's just a superficial
Oh,
question,
yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
And everyone's kind
So
of
I
like,
go and write my own because like,
right, right. And everyone's like, Jesus. So like people don't like those situations because they sit there for an hour and they don't feel like they got any value out of it. How much do you think that the fear of the controlling the narrative of the theology, and also the fear of, oh, we have to give people talking points or they won't know, they can't talk to each other, how much does that influence this?
I, it's hard to put a percentage, but 60-ish% probably, because, or even more, probably 80% in the idea of controlling the conversation. Where I think what I've seen a lot of is, like, I'm a very confident person. I see people, like, I'm not threatened by the idea of somebody coming at me with a different point of view. I'm ready to engage the conversation, and actually I'm open to changing my mind. Like, I don't care about that. But when I look to the side, a lot of times but I don't know. Like, if you go talk to her, they're going to convince her in a second something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these people are trying to protect all these other people instead of equipping them with just basic, like, foundational beliefs that then, outside of those viewpoints, it's okay to have a discussion. It's okay to have some wiggle room and not know exactly what the right answer is. And so I I think it's dangerous. A lot of church authority or pastors in and of itself that find probably too overwhelming because they let their minds run with all the different directions it could go if you start this narrative or you start this conversation, and it's easier just to leave it to them, and then we're not liable for any of this if it goes on.
Yeah.
But I I just don't, it's not scriptural. I mean, when we're being called to go out into the world and make disciples, I don't think that means we sit in our little camps and look at the non-Christians and say mean things at them. Like, we're called to go figure out how to love them and get out there and talk about it.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, I think there's a lot of people who they deep inside they want to be able to have conversations, real conversations. They don't know how to, but they don't have an environment, they don't have a way to do it. And so they're misdirected to social media to sort of just blurt out things, thinking that that's kind of fulfilling that, but it's not. You see what I'm saying? It's actually
Totally.
counterproductive. But that's where they found this. And then another thought that came to mind, the generation you were talking with in the jungle, and I think about just talking to my kids who are in that generation, 17, 18, 20, and some of their friends. One thing I've seen, especially, talking to my boys, who are my oldest two, I find their generation is getting pretty good at thinking for themselves, where I feel like a lot of people, certainly in my, I'm a Gen Xer, I'm the forgotten, the
Yep.
forgotten generation. Um, my generation, maybe even like the boomers before us, we were probably told a lot, hey, you just need to just accept what you're told and kind of parrot that. I'm overselling the point here, but basically, hey, we're going to tell you what
Sure.
you're
Like,
what we're going
yeah.
to tell you what you're supposed to believe and what you're supposed to think, and just if you do that, then you're fine. Don't waste time trying to think for yourself because then you're just going to muck things up.
Hmm.
And so I think that my generation struggles with that, and the boomers probably struggle with that, and we still see that, and that's off-putting to the younger generation. They don't want to just be told we're just going to spoon feed you what you need to know, and you just go and parrot that. They want to be able to think for themselves.
Totally. Well, and it's definitely rooted in, all the history in the conservatism, and you have the, Great Depression, then you have war, and everything in and of itself is kind of one that you have your marching orders, but then two, you have, from a biblical sense, it's much closer to the honor your father and mother, and a culture of honor and shame and respect.
Mm-hmm.
And as culture continues to go the way that it's going, there's less of that as far as specifically mandated. There's a conversation around what honor and respect looks like now in a whole different way. And you see that like down here in Peru, actually probably pretty where everywhere else, but America, for the most part, has a very honor and shame culture compared to what we have. And so that's where, with what we do here, it is a harder conversation. But
Yeah.
that's a lot of the work that we're doing here amongst the people, and being able to have those conversations with the young people. It's it's refreshing, and I'm hoping that I can learn to figure out how to do it more, because I think just like you, where we're professional Christians, that I sit there and I think about, like, most of America, or most of the people we're talking to right now, have jobs in the secular world. Like, you have the opportunity to talk to people that aren't Christian. Now, what you choose to talk about, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But is that not even a place to start? Like, for me, I have to purposely go out of my way to find non-Christians or find people outside of the Christian circle. And I enjoy that. But I know how intentional I have to be to go and do that.
Yeah.
And so then, if for those people that are just wondering, like, yeah, look in your neighborhood, look in your business, just ask engaging questions, like, what's going on in your life, what are you struggling with, and then go from there to be able to then talk about deeper things and practice with the people that that's not a high risk thing to sit there and talk to your neighbors or talk to your coworker, but you can practice there and then go talk to other people when you have a disagreement about something.
Yeah. No, that's a good word. And whenever I worked at that marketing company, um, one of the things that I really enjoyed about it is being the manager. Like I didn't, again, I was not I was careful. I didn't want to express things that came across as hatred or anything, but everybody on my team knew that I was a Christian. I think they knew that I had been a worship leader and I had been a pastor. Um, and there were some people on my team that were believers and others that weren't, but every one of them showed respect to me about that. My fellow manager that I worked with, not a believer, has no desire to be a believer, but he respected me a ton. And I think it's just because I just was honest about things and we just talked about life, and I would have one-on-one conversations with people on the team, and I would ask them, hey, how are things going? And even some of those folks that were not believers would ask me spiritual questions at times because they just,
Mm-hmm.
they knew my background. And so I could help them with that. And those that were believers, you know, it was okay if I prayed for them, kind of thing. So I think it's just like you're saying, it's authenticity. But a lot of people have been told, oh, you need to evangelize the people uh, your work, what's the word I'm looking for, at your office. And
Yeah.
and like there's some sort of magical system or process you're supposed to do. And I don't think that's it at all. I think that's unfair to tell people, oh, it's your job to go evangelize people at your office. No, just go make friends and be honest and be who you are and be willing to enter into conversations. And if you're not plastic and you're kind to people, then they'll respect you. and they'll be okay with. And and if there's someone who does get all their feathers ruffled because you have a different point of view, don't worry about it. That's their problem at that point, right? If they're really upset because you have a certain view on life and they hate that, all right, fine. You don't have to change that person. Just be kind to them, be respectful to them, and let them be who they are. But a lot of people will, I found that's not that they're not going to be that way.
Sure. Sure. Well, and that's you got to do the introspection thing where analyze how you're coming across,
Mhm.
analyze, to the degree why you may be disliked. But to me, that's, we also have the superpower. Like we have the Holy Spirit with us. And so
Mhm.
then in the midst of that, like that's one of the things that it's really nice to be down here. Like just to be able to feel and be led by the Spirit in a certain way, or where should we take a certain conversation? And I think that's where you've got that advocate sitting with you, that if you lead with kindness and love like you're talking about, and conversate in a way that just truly expressing, I want to be in community with you, I want to be your friend, I want to know you better, and then let the Spirit take you where it takes you. Like it
Yeah.
can help communicate through you, and you get the answers that way. And maybe we could talk about that at a later date as to what the Holy Spirit looks like, because that's one of the other big conversations I got to have with the team down here of just what does a personal relationship with the Spirit look like on a daily basis, and where does that take us? But that's for another episode.
Yeah. But I'm curious a little bit, talking to the team about authentic conversations as opposed to a cancel situation. I'm curious about some of the other things that you learned from them. I know that again, my best reference are my boys and some of their friends. They're not very interested in a lot of the political stuff because they see it so phony and so fake. They just dismiss it as kind of a joke, and they don't spend a lot of brain power on it. Um, I'm curious how the people you encountered down there, what is their take on, talking about current events and politics and that sort of thing? Do they want to lean into it, or are they just sort of tired of it and they?
So I will say, we didn't have a big round discussion around politics with the team,
Yeah.
but I did have one-on-ones with plenty of them about things.
Hmm.
There were tones of what you were just saying, where, man, all those guys are so phony. Um, I would say that a lot of them, because they are newer Christians and entering, I think probably three-fourths of them are in college, and the other fourth are, jumping straight into careers where they are very heavy-handed on the idea of, who is the audience that they are trying to reach? Because it's not us, because we see it as inauthentic, and we don't understand how what you're doing is influential. That is, I think, how they're digesting it. It's not
Hmm.
that we're dismissing it. It's just, why is that your tactic?
Hmm.
Because they don't understand it. Like they're not even like they're wanting to engage, but there's nowhere to engage at that. And that's what it really felt, because all of the conversations that I had relating to politics were very curiously driven, where they were just seeking information. It wasn't
Hmm.
even so they didn't like. So to me, it felt like there just wasn't a lot of information even getting to them, because all it is the noise, not actually what is at the root of what are we arguing at, and what are we trying to accomplish. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing was there was a lot of conversations around the dynamics of just world politics and, Israel and Palestine, and, a lot there where I think all the conversations that I had a tone of, well, here's what my parents think, and here's what I think. And so within that, I think there's, a lesson to be learned where, and I told them this while we were talking, a lesson to be learned of, hey, parents, start talking now about certain things, so that, there isn't this big chasm between kids and their parents. Like that's a big deal between me and my parents right now. We don't see eye to eye on a lot of the content, but part of that is because the rules of we don't talk politics on Thanksgiving. Like, when do we even talk about those things now? Like, we didn't talk about them when I was young, and so when it became time to talk, I was already an established adult. Uh, to start talking about it, I had a different view. And
Mhm.
so, like, watching that where they're trying to form their own belief system, I don't think it's yet any of them had been yet formed. It was just much more of an exploration at this point where I don't have to have my mind made up, but I'm watching and I'm very
Yeah.
curious, and I'm going to use all that I'm watching to then help me, I guess, at least establish the foundation of what I believe on all of these things. And they're
Mhm.
just in that transitory kind of place where, to the best of my ability, I was able to help move that conversation forward in an open way. And I think I gained the title Uncle Jason. So that's
Nice.
how they all see me. That they're really they appreciated the way in which I came alongside and chatted and wasn't heavy handed in things. And to my knowledge, everybody still loves me a lot, even though I disagreed on some of the things. And I think a lot of them are talking about coming back next year. And
El Tio.
so yeah, just because I expressed my beliefs didn't mean they had written me off or
They didn't write
something.
you off. Yeah. Well, and I hope that this has been a good thing. I've tried for years. My wife and I both, we don't try to hide our conversations about church or politics or whatever. We try to engage our kids, and there's times I'll just ask questions. For example, my my second oldest, my son, he's been the past few years really heavily involved in the theater world. He's done a lot of, I mean, he's done probably 30 shows over his in the last 10 years or so in theater, and he's encountered a lot of people, and it's not a a secret that in the theater world the percentage of liberal and you know gay folks or whatever is higher in the theater world than in the general public. And so I just ask them sometimes, like, what do you think about when you're encountering people who have these sort of different lifestyles or views? What is that like for you? How do you talk to them? How do you feel, and how do you navigate those sorts of things? And we have really good conversations about that.
Mm-hmm.
My oldest son joined a fraternity this last year at college, and there's some guys that are friends of his, and he's like, they're not Christians, and he tells me about how they have those sorts of those conversations, and I'm real proud of him for the fact that, like, one of his close friends who's the president of the fraternity, the guy says, "Hey, I really like you. I don't, the guy doesn't agree with Christianity, but he likes Jackson because Jackson's authentic." Like, he's told him that. He's like, you're who you are. And and I respect you for that. And you're my friend and I like you because of that. And I know what I'm getting with you. And so, like, I'm proud of the fact that he's able to establish that with folks, which I think is what we're talking about, right? Just being friends with
Sure.
people and just being who you are. And you know, and like I said, because if someone really says, I hate Christians to the point that I don't want to be a friend with any Christian, well, you can't force the issue, right? Because then what are you going to do? You're going to lie and try to pretend you're something you're not. That's not going to make anything. That's not going to make anything easier or better. You still have to be who you are. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You know?
Sure. I think so. But
Yeah.
I also think that Christians, and I'll speak for myself. I'm obviously kind of a guru for this, or I love it, for lack of a better word. Like, just understanding who I am and understanding my own abilities, my own giftings, my own strengths, my own convictions, all those kind of things. Like, I think we owe to ourselves, and to a degree we are required. We see multiple times within Scripture where it's highlighting the fact that we all have spiritual gifts.
Mhm.
We have all been uniquely made. And so it is, the onus is on us to understand who we are. And so then we can carry ourselves in an authentic way, like your son, that should be appealing. Like, we shouldn't be intimidating. We should be confident in who we are. And sure, if somebody's going to, push and hate on us, well, we're supposed to receive that with love, turn the other cheek. It doesn't mean we have to go back at them and engage them,
Right.
but it shouldn't be the end of our day. It shouldn't throw us off the course. It's just, yeah, like I'm going to continue to come back to the well every time I can, because that's what we're called to do. We
Yeah.
can't run away from our problems.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting you're running away from it, but just knowing where it's at and saying, all right, look, you know who I am. I'm here. I'm not going to change. And
Yep.
and let it be. So, but I'm glad
But
you
it's
had.
those.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
So I guess so. This last it's the people that. So for me, what I get frustrated about is when I have these conversations. It's the people. It's so obvious to see that the beliefs that they have, they've been told what they're supposed to believe, and they don't actually believe it. That because I watched it on a news channel, or because my pastor told me this is the right answer. Like the process of being told something or a truth is stated, and then we need to digest that and make it ours, and not just regurgitate something, so that if I ask you about it and you tell me, like, I can instantly tell, like, you're not really holding this stance that tightly. You just do it because somebody told you to do this. And that's the most frustrating thing. And I think that's also the most frustrating thing for young adults and people that are trying to make an impact on this world, that they can see how inauthentic that is.
And yet,
I think authenticity.
and yet, though, we still see, because we're talking about young people, particularly, who they're still trying to get an identity. They're still trying to build their self-confidence, their self-esteem. We see people who they so long to be accepted and a part of something, that then they'll often fall into all kinds of things. It could be a cult, but it could be
Totally.
some queers for Palestine, or something where they fall into some narrative or some group, and they don't even really understand what they're doing. They're just doing it because they want to be a part of
Totally.
something, right?
This goes both ways.
Right.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of jokes about the queers for Palestine. It's like, do you know what you're talking about? Because if you were to go over there and say, I'm a gay person, I support you, you're not going to last very long. I mean, that's just truth.
Would not would be received
It
well.
would not be received well. But I think there are just a lot of people, they don't know what they believe, but they don't, but their parents, maybe their parents are the church people. They're like, well, I don't want to do that. So I want to be a part of a different group and establish myself as my own thing. So then they link up with, and this is the tale it's as old as time, right? The 60s was a big, the whole hippie culture of the 60s was a big deal about this, of like, we're going to rebel against my parents' generation, and we're going to do our own thing, and just smoke weed and listen to rock music. It's not much different today. So I think it's an interesting thing, because I think there's a desire, like we're saying, for that generation. They desire authenticity, but at the same time, that desire to be liked and loved and needed maybe can force them to go against that instinct within them. And that might be, I'm just thinking out loud, that might be some of the stuff that's driving some of the mental illness problems and the depression and all the stuff going on with that generation, where they feel so much weight that they have to be a part of something, and they're struggling with that. They don't know what to believe, and it's wearing on them.
Yeah, sure. I think that could be part of it. And the way my mind processes what you just said is I look inward, and I look around at my generation and your generation, and that if that's where it's going, there's an opportunity by which we can provide a better example
Yes.
for how to do it.
Yes.
That's attractive.
Right.
And because I just always look inward. Like, I don't want to blame whatever's happening. Like, I'm sometimes enamored and by the idea of the hippie generation and being alive then. Like, I think that would have been fun to me.
Yeah.
But now we're going in that direction now, like you're saying. But yeah, like I think every person can look inward and say, okay, what am I doing to make an impact and to move this conversation forward in our homes and then in our communities? And I guess maybe engage Clay and I and give us ideas or push
Yeah.
back on us and figure out, what could be beneficial even to how to have these conversations. Maybe we have a mock interview or something, bring
Yeah.
somebody in that is completely different than us. That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I have some buddies that just bring them on and let's have a conversation.
Yeah. But I think you hit the nail on the head where the younger generation, they are looking for examples. They're looking for authentic examples to help them figure out life. And it's really on our older generations. It's incumbent on us to do that, but we have to do it in a kind and loving way. And as you said earlier, too often the tactics that we employ are terrible tactics. So we push them aside, and we're not a good example. So they're like, well, I don't know. Let me look for somewhere else that's a good example. And yeah, it's really incumbent on us to be that example. And somehow I just started an exercise on my watch. When my watch thinks I'm riding my bike, I wish I could just get the. Would it be great if you could just run an exercise on your watch and it actually did affect your body?
That would be awesome. You know what I'm thinking about right now? I just really hope this is recording. I'm
Oh,
really hoping this recording, we got this.
it says it's recording. So yeah. So all right, do we want to wrap up the episode?
Let's wrap it up,
All right. Good.
baby. All right,
I'll,
we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for joining us from the jungle. Good seeing you, Clay.